episode of Rush Roundtable, and we are at episode 210. And the song we're talking about today is Half the World, track 3 off the album. And without further ado, I will introduce the panel. We have Paul Simon, we have Mario Papa, and we have Ryder back in. And I think this is going to be a really good discussion, very straightforward song. So without further ado, I'll read a little bit of the lyrics. We'll talk about what's happening, and here it comes. Half the world hates what half the world does every day. Half the world waits while half gets on with it anyway. And then we have technically a chorus. We always have these things about what's a chorus in these songs. So what are our thoughts about this opening set of lyrics?
Just goes right into it.
Mhm.
It doesn't set like a background or any of that stuff. It just says this person, this half likes this. This half likes that. Just no background, nothing. Just pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, I feel the
I
same. It's
think
like the music. Sorry, Ryder. Sorry.
oh sorry, yeah. I think kind of compared to the rest of the songs in this album, at least that we've looked at so far on the roundtables, um, I think this brings a little bit more levity to the album. The album starts off pretty heavy, with tracks like the title track, and I feel like having a kind of like bouncier, almost poppier song in the album kind of spaces out really nice. Gives it a little breathing room, and I really like the atmosphere that this song brings to the album. So I really like how the song starts off.
Yeah, you have Alex kind of kicking it off. It's a very nice, somewhat distorted tone, not so much, more clean, very wet sounding. And I think just the way they come in together, not so much together, but in sort of a sequence. Alex goes in, Getty comes underneath, and then everybody's in once Neil does his bit. So it's kind of it's like the half theme kind of, it feels like a half, these half entrances coming in musically. So that's really reflective, I think, of the song itself. Um, and then we can even go right into the I guess the first chorus, we can call it. Half the world lives, half the world makes, half the world gives while the other half takes. Half the world is, half the world was, half the world thinks while the other half does. So what are our thoughts on this?
One thing I did notice is that in an interview with John Sakamoto, Neil did say that the entire song's inspiration came from that first line of half the world. There's a line I ran into somewhere that said half the world hates what the other half is doing, and I just thought it was beautiful, that one line. In many cases, there is one little quote or one line that the whole thing is built from, and they probably reflect a period of sensitivity to what's going on around me. So that was the inspiration for the whole thing. I'm not a drummer, but with Neil's video work in progress, I did notice, and this is to the layperson, so drummers forgive me, but I did notice that when he starts the song, he starts on the left side of his kit, then he switches to the right for the second stanzas, then in the chorus, it's the whole kit. Then it's back to the left, then it's over to the right, then the chorus is the whole kit. As a layperson, like I said, I found that really interesting too. He doesn't do anything by accident, and this isn't a cover. It's Neil playing, so that's got to mean something.
I didn't know that. You just said that. That's like I
Yeah.
didn't think about that. Yeah,
There's definitely a lot of motion like in the music. And I think it's kind of interesting where I feel like, one of the raps that this, like bad raps that this song gets is that the lyrics are a little bit tiresome. And I can understand that on a first listen, half the world all the time, like at the start of a line might get a little grating on a first listen. But I feel like the music here, it's less about the lyrics. I mean, well, obviously the lyrics are still a big part of it, but I get a lot of satisfaction just by listening to how the music moves through. Like you were saying, there's a lot of motion on the drum kit. There's a surprising amount of stuff going on in this song, like little bass fills, just little changes that Alex makes in the strumming patterns. Like, I think there's just a lot more going on here, that's kind of behind a very simple lyric. And I think that, if you look a little bit beyond that, you can find a little bit more to like about this track.
Yeah, I think even Paul mentioned the work in progress drum instructional video that he put out talking about how he put the songs together. And of course, his studies with Freddie Gruber at the time, he took the whole year before recording this record. So the idea of motion and circular motion was a huge theme And of course, the world is round. So, and he took that time to really flesh out these ideas he was learning to approach the band. And it sounded like him, but the clock was different. Neil's clock was a lot different. And the other guys had to adjust to that. So you could feel that in the playing, and you could, of course, see it if you watch the Work in Progress video series DVD. Really just nails it down pretty well. And I think just the directness of the song kind of masks the like Ryder just talked about. There's little hidden things that go on this whole album, not even just this song, but I think that the word half is really, it can be grating, but again, repetition, Donna's rule. There's a reason why he does this. So yeah, great points. And moving on to the next verse, half the world talks with half a mind on what they say, half the world walks with half a mind to run away. And then we have, I guess that would be another chorus right after that. So what do we think about this little section of lyric?
They're not using their full brain. They're only using half their brain. If they use the other half
Yeah.
of their brain, they could probably act like the other half.
Yeah, I feel like
but I think it's true.
yeah, that's a very like upfront literal message right there. That one really jumps out to me as like a big message right there. And then also right beside that, with half a mind to run away, I feel like that's also kind of like to be able to like admit, at least like compared to like the first part of this little verse here, to admit like kind of when you're wrong about something, because I feel like a lot of the people at least who kind of like make these decisions like so half based on their mind, like not really thinking about it all the way through, part of why they have such a staunch defense of it is because they simply just can't admit that they're wrong, or they feel like there's something wrong with admitting that they're wrong. That's at least how I interpret this little verse right here. It's really like big message jump out right here to me.
Yeah.
And actually jumping off that, one thing by the time lyrically that we get to this point in the song, what I'm noticing as a pattern is each stanza is there's do's and there's don'ts. There's haves and haves. There's people who are doing something about it and people who are not, or people who are working against it. That dichotomy continues every single time. There's the positive and then the negative. There's, you can do something about it. And one of Neil's writing styles with his lyrics, normally that call to action comes at the end of the song after he's written a set of lyrics or painted the picture lyrically, where in this one it's you have this or you have that, or and we have that in this case. So every single time, yes or no, yes or no.
Yeah, communication is that operative word, right? It's like, that communication breakdown. There's people who want to talk and try to solve problems, and there's people who run away because it just feels easier to go away from something rather than confronting it and facing it head on. So yeah.
Tying into the album.
Mhm.
We're back to communication and connection again, but in a more contemporary feel, a more timeless feel than, say, Test for Echo, which was very modern and contemporary. This is more timeless and classic, a bit like older Rush,
Right.
where it's about the world, like songs that had concern like This Nearly Warning or Second Nature, where, look, we need to get our stuff together, as opposed to, a song more based in fantasy or something like that, or in the other songs on Test for Echo that are about the here and now. Test for Echo, virtuality, very modern at the time songs. This one's a little bit more timeless. So
yeah, I think just the approach to the writing of it was that way too. It's like very, very direct style of writing, and you can really totally hear that, how it was fleshed out pretty. And I think even Getty was talking about how pleased they were with the writing of it, his melodies, what he came up with, and just the overall production of assembling the tune felt really good to them. So very cool. All right, so we can work into the next bit. After that is half the world lies, half the world learns, half the world flies as half the world turns, half the world cries, half the world laughs, half the world tries to be the other half. Yeah. So what say we about this?
It's like a tale of two. I'm thinking, sorry to cut you off, but I'm just keep thinking A Tale of Two Cities, or I'm thinking it's weird that I'm going to be comparing Rush to Shakespeare here, but it's like Romeo and Juliet. You have the two fighting families, the Montagues and the Capulets, and just that a lot of the same themings. They're fighting over their difference in opinions, and it's just the same could go for this as well. It's just that same common theme. You're always going to have someone that's going to be against your thoughts and ideas. And there's no matter how much you try to influence them or change it, they're just going to be set in their ways. And it's kind of related to modern times today.
One lyric that I feel a lot of, like, very, very timeless, and I feel especially with people kind of in my generation, half the world tries to be the other half.
Oh, that's a big.
I feel is such a strong, like, for people my age, the feeling of like seeing people on like social media all the time and just wondering like, oh, why do they like have everything compared to me? Like, how come they have all these friends? How come they have cool cars? Why don't I have these things? Or like, or like, to me personally as a musician, I'll see a musician play a crazy bass riff and I start thinking I'm the worst bass player on the planet because I can't do it. But that is it's so superficial. And this lyric of half the world tries to be the other half really puts into perspective how kind of, dumb that is, to try to consistently live your life comparing yourself to others, which I feel is not only just such a great like contemporary message, but such a strong message throughout all of Rush music. There's so many recurring themes of like individuality and things like that, especially if you look towards earlier Rush. And just with their musical identity as a band, how unique they were throughout all their different albums, just within their own discography, I just think that's an incredible lyric right there.
Yeah, I think it really reflects Neil's approach to the lyric writing, where it was more, at this point, more observational. He's looking at things rather than sort of being more introspective. He's more in the camera eye type of,
He's like in the
looking
middle.
at everything.
He's neutral, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He's observing both sides quarreling, and he's just in the middle, just observing it, not saying, "Oh, which half should I go in?" It's just like maybe these two sides need to work together.
Yeah, that's another big thing I like about the song. I love that it maintains a very neutral stance and doesn't really like it doesn't. I initially thought of this as a very like political song at first, but the more I think about it, is it's less of like trying to take a side and like take jabs at the other, and more just like an observational top-down kind of thing. I think that's a really great way to look at it.
Yeah,
It's not trying to solve it like, say, Open Secrets or Hand Over Fist, where the end thought is we need to come together, and it's simply look at what's around you. Again, the whole theme being, is there anybody out there? Are you seeing what I'm seeing as far as the theme of the album? This is what I'm observing.
yeah. I think even the fact that he released his first book at this time as well, The Masked Rider, in his travels through Africa and seeing how people were living and getting back to his own values and really kind of reinforcing from a trip like that, when you have dysentery and you're running to find a restroom, it's like you tend to appreciate what you have. And it's so reflective of this. Like, he's seeing how this other half is living. And meanwhile, he goes back home, he could do any number of things that these people don't necessarily have, sort of reinforcing what Ryder was just talking about, this comparative thing, that goes on. And which can be dangerous if you do too much. If you try to compare too much, you can get into a little bit of trouble. So I think there's lessons for us to learn rather than him giving us something to learn and solving a problem. So I think it just great all around, just having us think rather than him thinking about something. Now we have to think about all the points you guys have mentioned. What are we doing? So having said all that, let's move into this next section. This next section is deviates from the half thing a little bit. The word half isn't quite in all of the sets of lyrics here. So let me read them. I read them to you. Half of us divided, like a torn up photograph, some repetition. Half of us are trying to reach the other half, to reach the other half. We got some repetition in there. We know all about that from Donna's rule of repetition.
Down the doctor.
So, yes. So all on purpose. So what say we about this part?
Torn up photograph. I love that visual. It's perfect. Even the music video, filmed in sepia tones and meant to look older in different versions. and all the divisions. We can talk about that, but the idea of a photograph, the photograph is the complete picture. Once you tear it up, and in half in this case, you're not seeing the complete picture. So you don't have the whole story. You don't have the proper perspective on things. So that's how I see it.
Yeah,
I think it's they realize the people on one side think there's other people out there, people maybe that don't think the same thing, and they're going to try and reach out to these people, no matter what kind of form of communication it is, to try and share their ideas or see how they think of things differently. Oh, hey, what do you think about this? Oh, wow, I didn't think of it like that. Maybe I should start thinking more about it. Maybe they're reaching out to other people just to see their thoughts, and maybe they could collaborate, and then they could be together as a whole.
I think I really like the music here. So I especially like Alex's guitar. I think just the way it moves through the different chords and stuff, I think it's really nice. Once again, kind of changing up the pace of the song, but I still think it keeps the groove really nice, but it keeps things fresh. I like how this bridge kind of moves through, doesn't overstay its welcome. And like, it moves out pretty well, especially after the little solos right after this, right?
Yep.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got the melodic strum on the lead line, and then underneath it, it's got the constant strumming. And gonna, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, there's motion there too, keeping it going. Absolutely, and the blend of the sounds, was something that was very conscientious, very conscientious. I can't say the word. It was very more emphasized on Alex's part of things of having these acoustic guitars and electric guitars kind of layered in to kind of fatten the sound up a little bit. And speaking of which, we go into this interlude, which he uses mandola. I mean, there's not a whole lot of Rush tunes that use mandola, and it's kind of like a mandolin, but not quite. Mandola is like what viola is to violin. Has been the comparison of
Uh,
mandola to mandolin. They both have four courses that are doubled, so the tuning's a little different. It's a little bit larger of an instrument, but I never heard a Rush song with a mandola solo on it, of all things. I mean, it's kind of a solo, but it's more textural, I think, than it is a solo. I mean, there's a bit of a melody in there, and just a great part to bring in, like out of nowhere, like, but it makes complete
wasn't
sense.
expecting.
No,
Were we
Yeah.
expecting that?
It's really that once again, it's super, super fresh. I at first thought it was it gave me very like late era Rush vibes where Alex would use like more like folk instruments. Like I had immediately jumps to I believe there's a balalaika at some point on Snakes and Arrows. But that's initially what I thought it was, but super, super unique. I wasn't expecting something like that. I was expecting more just like a traditional kind of rock solo, like how this album will typically lean. But really, really interesting choice here. I think it's really cool.
I think it symbolizes maybe the voice of reason or the unity between the two halves because it just comes out of nowhere. Maybe it's just you're not expecting it, and I like to symbolize it as that neutral person. That's I would say maybe Neil in this case. Looking on both sides and now coming into the argument and saying, "Hey, why don't you guys do this, or why don't you think about what you're saying to each other? You could do this, and then you could do that, and we all could." Do it together. I just think it symbolizes the
New
unity.
voice, the
Yeah,
new voice being introduced.
exactly.
I follow you.
Yeah.
that's
And
a great point.
the other thing that jumped out at me was the use of it. If I read correctly, I do know it goes back to it's like a relative of or an evolution of the lute. So I think back to like Italian or like Irish music. So you're going half the world across. So you're introducing an element that's half a world away. So
Ah,
I think it brings that kind of texture and flavor to it that, okay, I'm going to try and introduce something from the other half to show you. Again, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's the feel I got from
no,
it.
good. That's good.
That makes complete sense. It really is. It's like, you're trying to bring worlds together and sort of, narrow the divide. And I think that's an excellent point because you don't associate, Mandola being on a Rush record, or you don't really hear it that often unless you're really into folk music and you're checking out world music and you're doing ethnomusicology and discovering different sounds from different countries, and that's the attempt, like you guys just pointed out, of trying to somehow bring something together where just not that much of a divide in culture, And this is an instrument, it's like a folk instrument, like you guys mentioned, bringing that into a tune like this really, I think, drives a good point home, and kind of a nice, I guess a period on this big sentence that just preceded this section of music. Because you would just normally hear a guitar solo of some kind, either whether it's acoustic guitar, 6-string, 12-string, whatever, electric guitar. But to have that on there, it makes complete sense. And again, Alex is the dude for that, man. He just, whatever he brings in, it completely fits and makes sense. And it's like, I think also too, with the mandola coming in, I think some of that was from his Victor sessions on certain tunes. He would have these instruments in there. So I think he was kind of playing around with this idea and kind of bringing it in just from having that experience, so I could be wrong, but I kind of feel that's a little bit of, kind of bringing this into a project where they had that break for a while. So
we know his confidence was higher after
right.
doing Victor. That had already been said. So yeah, that makes sense. That would fit.
And doing all the work himself, writing, all the music, and then that experimentation phase and how that would fit into something like this. I think he totally made it work, So I guess we'll continue onward to the next part. Next set of lyrics. Next verse, half the world cares while half the world is wasting the day. Half the world shares while half the world is stealing away. And then we have a chorus type of deal after that. So what do we think about this part?
Again, those who give, those who take. You've got the doers and the don't doers, or the positive and the negative again.
Yeah, it's a pretty consistent theme running throughout. Absolutely. Anybody else have something to say about this part? All right, so we'll continue onward. Half the world lives, half the world half the world lives, half the world makes, half the world gives while the other half takes, half the world cries, half the world laughs, half the world tries to be the other half. And then we have some music after that, and then we have a final bit where, again, repetition, to be the other half. So the last stretch here, what do we think about this part?
I think no matter what happens or what type of unity or reason there is, someone's always going to have a different view. Someone's going to have a different opinion, no matter how hard you try to convince them or teach them or force them. They'll always have a different viewpoint than you, and everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And there's nothing else you could do. But I guess at this point, just worry about yourself and how you think and feel.
Or wish them well.
Or that too.
That's
the problem.
Yeah,
I love how this track ends. I think as this track closes, I really just think about, this is such a rich track for this album. Just thinking about, especially like with how similar, how simple, I should say, the lyrics might seem at first. But just with how much we've been able to discuss about this, it really makes you think like just how much hides behind a lot of these Rush tracks that might seem simple as first. And, to the average listener, and especially to the people who just will blindly hate this album because people see it as the worst Rush album for some reason. There's so much to these albums that you really need to like dig in and listen to. I just think this is really one of the songs I see a lot of unfortunate like discussion about, just because of the kind of simple nature of it compared to some of the other Rush lyrics. But man, this track is just great song. And it's right at the top of the album too. So I think there was probably a little belief in it, that there was a big push behind the song. It's very strong, and it's a very big, like, especially with what we've been talking about, there's some pretty like, big messages in these songs. So, and it's right at the top of the album. So going in through the rest of the album, I'm really excited to see what we kind of unpack through it.
I agree. Yeah, the sequencing is so important with any record. But yes, like I think just the fact that they played so much on this tour too, really kind of is a testament to how much they enjoyed the song themselves, of actually performing it and the writing that went into it. And they just had a great time. And just that, I think that's the thing for me that I get from this tune, is the enthusiasm level just feels so high, and for this tune. So I think, again, the messages are very direct, like you guys all mentioned, very clear. There's no fooling around. There's nothing really to, parse. It's like completely direct. And I love the way you mentioned Raya too, how the song ends, it's just that little guitar bit that Alex has in there, it's just the way, and then having a final ending, there's no fade outs, there's none of that type of thing. It just kind of punctuates everything. It's a nice punctuation moment to to really, really wrap it up. I think it's a fantastic tune. I think just the overall album and the first two roundtables really kind of, having seen them, if you guys haven't seen the first two roundtables, get in there and check them out. I think that's just the running theme of this is the album itself is really there's a lot of hidden gems, there's a lot of hidden stuff that people, if you go back and listen to it, you'll appreciate it even more.
I could account for that. I could definitely account for that. You have to listen to it more to just get all the hidden details. It's like watching a movie again. You see it again, you didn't notice in the first part.
Right. People think I'm crazy when I say this is one of my favorite Rush albums. Just go through it again. Just go through it again. Watch some of these. Just kind of get a little bit more background on the songs. Just think about them a little more. These are some really, really great Rush tracks.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then having the accompanying video to this tune, and like Paul mentioned before, having the visual of that, just like in Driven, which was mentioned before on a previous roundtable. The overlook is great, having music videos. I just watched the music video today, and it's like, wow, and even then on that video, they're having a great time. So, so good stuff. So I guess on that note, we probably could wrap. Any closing thoughts?
Go listen to the rest of this album. It's fantastic, but especially listen to this song. It's really, really, really good.
Yeah, definitely give it a chance for sure. Give the album a chance. The album is great. I know people are.
A majority of the songs could relate to modern times, and this song right here is no example. It is an example of how you could think about it and relate it to modern culture, as the majority of the album is.
It's a really, really contemporary album. I spoke about it a lot on the Rush deep dive for this album, which go check that out if you haven't. It was so much fun doing that. But so many messages in this album. I come back to this album so much for so many like issues that I feel like I face like as a young adult, like still kind of growing up, going through college and stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff in here that I'm like, how is this music like even written about? Like there's a song on this album about like online dating. Like what? It's so crazy. I don't understand it at all, but it's just such a great album. So contemporary with its messages.
Indeed. I concur. Any closing thoughts, Paul? No? Okay. Good. So I guess on that note, we can wrap it up. Please like and subscribe to the channel. If you'd like to be on an episode of the Roundtable, feel free to reach out and we'll provide you the email address. And on behalf of our esteemed panel, thank you very much. And we will talk to you guys very soon. Take care. Bye.